What's up, guys? So today I'm going to be talking about David Tennant's run on Doctor Who. So basically, I've started watching Doctor Who from the first episode of the reboot TV series, starting 2005. Before that, the show ended around 1980 or something. And so starting from 2005 up until the current season I'm watching, which is season 6. Um, there's been 3 actors playing the Doctor. The first one had 1 season. The second one had about 4 seasons, which was David Tennant, and now we have Matt Smith. Um, and so this is basically just going to be on David Tennant, because he has by far the longest run so far, not including the old series. And so here's my opinions on it. So first off, why did David Tennant quit? From what we saw in the series, it didn't seem like he was getting tired of the series. In fact, the last episode we saw him in, he seemed, rejuvenated. He still seemed very fresh. And although he had lost his companions that he traveled with, and he was on his own again, classical Doctor, he still seemed fairly, ready to act. And so that's the thing, though. Even with the first Doctor in the 2005 series, it didn't seem like he wanted to quit either. I mean, he only had 1 season, and I was very shocked when the series ended. I mean, the season ended, and he got rejuvenated. I'm like, that's it? Literally, he had 10, 15 episodes as a Doctor, and he was done. However, I did some research, and David Tennant quit because he said he had a chance to bow out, I believe, and had he not chosen to do it then, he claimed he never would have because he loved it so much. So he wanted to bow out when he still liked doing what he did, rather than when he got tired and bored of it, so people wouldn't get tired of him as the Doctor. I think it's a strange thing now, because I believe that with the rapidity and speed of media nowadays, they could pump out very full-length episodes at a much quicker pace than in the 1970s and 80s. And more so than that, it's much more energy consuming of a process for the actors, because of the more dialogue and so forth, and because of the competition. To be the Doctor, you really have to have a very strong personality, at least be able to act that personality out. And so in my opinion, I believe that in the future, from here on out, Doctor Who as a series will continue, but the actors will be recycled through at a much quicker pace. If you look at the old series, there were about 8 or 9 Doctors, and some of them had very long runs as a Doctor, I believe decades at a time. And the reasoning behind that is because back then television was probably slower, the technology wasn't always there. That's probably why I'll probably never watch the old series. I've looked at it, and I mean, some of it's in black and white, everything looks so bad. And I mean, even with the current series, it's a lot of it's honestly, it's very old fashioned. The technology is a lot of it looks really fake, honestly, even now. And only towards the current couple seasons, which I'm just starting to hit, those look fairly realistic. And maybe it's just because I've been brought up in this more advanced age, but the cinematography is just much more realistic currently, rather than even a few years ago. And that's why I have a hard time watching the Doctor Who from a long time ago. However, the Doctor Who from a long time ago, you can see it's a lot slower pace, and therefore the actors stay on longer because they don't get that overstimulation every single day pumping out episodes. And so it's a sad thing, but at the same time, that's like the tolerance of humans have not changed. It's just the stimulation has changed, and therefore, I truly believe that it's a sad thing, but the actors playing Doctor Who from here on out will be recycled fairly quickly. I would predict, you know, maybe a few seasons, and then they're done. And that might decrease over time as things progress until we hit a threshold where you can't really, you can only go so quick in a day filming episodes. Anyhow, more back onto David Tennant. I thought he was quite the great Doctor. I watched all the seasons of him. I do have to say he played a better Doctor than the first Doctor of the series. Honestly, I only have 3 Doctors to truly compare because of the 2005 series only housing 3 Doctors. And I can't lie, I have to be honest, I do have to say something has to do with his looks. He just naturally looks more like the Doctor that I would envision. Maybe it's just, he's better looking than the first Doctor of the 2005 series and Matt Smith. But I think it also has to do with his performance as the Doctor. All 3 of these carry the same exuberance, but to different degrees, and they all have this, slightly different behaviors and mannerisms. But I truly think that David Tennant does the best job, also because of his personality. I mean, sure, if there's some actor who looked just like David Tennant, but played the Doctor in a very nonchalant, indifferent way, it wouldn't work the same, and I couldn't say that I would have liked that actor. But I do think that David Tennant did fairly good as a Doctor. Honestly, there's a lot of older Doctors who apparently were pretty good, but in my opinion, I think David Tennant, like, he played out the quirks of the Doctor, and I think Matt Smith's doing a fairly good job of it now as well, and that's sort of like a compliment to their acting, because it just shows like how far acting and projecting very distinct, unique personalities as an actor can do for you. And it's not just about looking a certain part or having good looks or looking a certain way. You can't say that Matt Smith is a Brad Pitt or someone who's really good looking, and yet he plays. Yeah, I mean he plays Doctor Who still almost to that extent. However, every actor who plays Doctor Who, I believe, has specific perspectives that generally they coincide, but some parts vary. And I see this with Matt Smith compared to David Tennant. Matt Smith's acting, and I've only seen a few episodes of him as the Doctor so far, there are very clear moments where he portrays the Doctor in a more ruthless, rude, and mean, sort of outbursty way. There's scenes where he just straight out screams at his companion, Amy. Like just recently, he said something like, "This is not an argument. I mean, this is not a discussion. Get back on your ship, because I am telling you to." And he says something like that. It was more mean and rude than how I phrased it, but more so than that, he was like straight up screaming it, like literally outraged at the top of his lungs. David Tennant would probably never do that. If he did, he would have done it in a different way, so that it didn't come across so like angry and like just mean in general. Like in my opinion, that's a very childish act, a humanistic act that someone who's 900 years old shouldn't do as a Doctor. Now, is David Tennant the best Doctor? I don't. I mean, one thing about David Tennant is that he always had this general vibe of being nice, and in some areas very mushy and loving and caring and compassionate. And there are definitely scenes where he just it's like a love story, and I think he plays that as the Doctor. That's his personal spin on the Doctor that the others don't do, and it's definitely clear. Like he's definitely he plays that like loving, compassionate role that I don't think Matt Smith will ever play on that level, because that's just not in his character as the Doctor. And through the story, they could just reason it as he's past that era of mushiness as the Doctor. There's definitely scenes where David Tennant and Rose Tyler, where it was just very, mushy, and there's heartstrings being pulled and so forth. And he was always a very nice Doctor, a very compassionate Doctor, always doing the good thing. And there are moments where he's always talking about doing the right thing and not killing anyone and sacrificing himself and giving the bad guys a second and third chance before he throws down the hammer. And you see this time and time again as David Tennant as a Doctor. And then there's moments where he talks about how there's that moment where he talked about how he loved his sonic screwdriver because it doesn't maim or kill and so forth. And one good reason that's because of the screenwriters. They wrote the plot and the story, and David Tennant's just acting it out. However, I do think that as an actor, he re-emphasizes that beyond other actors as the Doctor would, and therefore that's his play as the Doctor. More so than that, I mean, it's very clear. Like if you compare it to the other two Doctors, they were, from my opinion, so far, they were much more ruthless. They were fairly angsty and so forth. But they didn't play it in the same way, and that's just how it is. Like, as an actor, different things are going to bleed through whether you like it or not, based on your looks, how you present yourself, how you walk. I mean, the first Doctor in the 2005 series, I don't even know his name, but he had this sort of lanky walk, and it was kind of weird, and it put off a different aroma. Like, just the way you walk and present yourself, it conveys something. And he had this sort of weird lanky walk. He always held hands with Rose Tyler. It was fairly strange. Then David Tennant, when he plays a Doctor and when he walks, I mean, first off, he never walks. He's running, and he's very brisk. He's always, like, his facial features are always, serious and alert and let's get something done. And he's always, up and doing something and Whereas, with the first Doctor, he was always lackadaisical, walking sort of lankily. I don't think he really was concerned about how he was walking when he was acting as a Doctor. So that bled through. Like, these sort of things just bleed through naturally. Which I think is important when casting a Doctor, because the person playing him, like, you can rely on their acting abilities to a certain extent, but some things are going to bleed through from him as a person. So you sometimes have to select for the person, not just the acting ability as well. And then finally, I do have to say, there's these moments that David Tennant portrayed as the Doctor that I don't think Matt Smith could have done in the same way. Perhaps it was just I do think that it literally has to be it has to do with David Tennant as a person, having him understand the story, being as serious and heartfelt as he is as a person, and portraying that role perfectly. I couldn't see Matt Smith just reenacting some of the same scenes, and that's fine because Matt Smith has his own things that maybe David Tennant can't do. But I do think David Tennant does these scenes well, and what I'm talking about are those, not those heartfelt scenes this time, but the ones where he's, the doctor, there's that episode, spoiler alert, where literally he's traveling through the timelines of this girl's life. I believe she was the queen, and basically it was that scene where, that episode where they were on the ship, and the ship had, time warp holes that led into different times of this girl's life, and they were trying to groom this girl to a certain age before they extracted their heart to use on their ship. And so that's at the very end when the doctor screws up. And by the way, I never understood that. Why couldn't he have just gone back in time and, with his time machine, the TARDIS, and, said, oops, I screwed up. But I guess it didn't work out for whatever reason. What happened was he screwed up, and he came back at the wrong time, and the girl was already super old, and she had already died. And she left him a letter saying something like, please come quickly, death is quickly approaching. And the doctor had promised her to travel with her through the stars, through time and space, but he screwed up and he was too late. And so that scene when he's just looking off into the carriage in the distance, which is pulling the queen to her funeral, and he just takes the letter and tucks it into his sleeve and just looks off, very solemn and sad. That scene, I don't think anyone other than David Tennant would have done that as much justice. And there were other scenes like this which, as his time as a doctor, portrayed the tragedy of the doctor, because that's one of the curses of immortality, that technically we don't know if Time Lords are immortal or not, but regardless, it's one of those curses of having a somewhat finite mind and yet a infinite body can do to you. All your loved ones and the people you love just age and die slowly while you remain young. And that moment just epitomized the solemnness and sadness of the doctor, and how seasoned and experienced he is in understanding them, because he's done this so many times before where he's seen these people die in age. And David Tennant just expressed that moment without saying a word. And there were other moments when he portrayed similar things. However, honestly, I had my fears of Matt Smith as a doctor. I'm just going to wrap up with Matt Smith. I had my fears with Matt Smith as the doctor, because I knew it was coming. I mean, I knew he was going to become the doctor just from how he looked and how he's portrayed. I thought, there's no way he could be that good a doctor. But then the first episode, boom, I understood why they cast him as the doctor. His acting as the doctor was almost impeccable. It was good in his own unique way, literally. The David Tennant did his own spin that was just as good, and both of them coincide in many ways, so that they epitomize the doctor and almost make the doctor sharper and exemplify him in a new way, in a sharper way. There's that scene where David Tennant's like, da 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 da, well, da 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 da, well, and he just keeps correcting himself because his first statement always had some sort of exception, and it was just this whole scientific dialogue that David Tennant was holding. And then Matt Smith has a very similar sort of stuff where he, in the first episode, he's throwing out all this sort of food to get his new taste buds in order, and he finally settles on fish sticks and some sort of paste, and he's eating that from a bowl, and it's just the quirkiness of the Doctor. It makes sense. However, Matt Smith definitely did it in his own way. He definitely portrays the Doctor in a more, you know, mean way in certain ways. Not exactly mean, but like mean, but not rude mean. Like in the first episode, he literally, you know, berates the girl for giving him the wrong food. He's like, "Get out," or "You call this oatmeal?" And he literally throws the food out of the house. I don't think David Tennant would have done that. Um, but again, that's the screenwriters writing the story. If David Tennant had to do that as a Doctor, I think he wouldn't have portrayed it in such a mean way. Regardless, I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm kind of sad David Tennant left, but I mean that's what happens. As always, I'll see you guys later, and peace out.